If you've been scrolling through endless lists of mixers, watching demo videos, reading the occasional forum post, and still feel like you're stuck in a loop of maybe this one, maybe that one, this review is going to clear that up for you. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I spent a few days actually setting up the Mackie VLZ4 16-channel mixer in a small rehearsal space, a home studio corner, and even a local podcast booth, so I can tell you what it does when the lights go on and the microphones start talking. First off, the biggest hesitation most people have with a 16-channel board is whether the extra channels and the extra preamps are worth the extra dollars, especially when you could just buy a 2-track interface and a software bundle. The VLZ4 lands in that gray zone because it promises boutique-quality Onyx Mic Preamps and a 60 dB ultra-wide gain range, but the real question is, does that translate into something you notice when you're actually mixing a band or a spoken word session? Let's start with who should consider this mixer. If you run a small to medium live sound rig, think a church worship team, a local band doing weekly gigs, or a DJ who also needs to mic a vocalist, the 16-channel layout gives you the flexibility to handle multiple instruments, 2 stereo line inputs, and a handful of outboard effects without constantly swapping cables. The 16 boutique-quality Onyx preamps are the headline feature, and they really shine when you plug in a condenser vocal mic that needs clean, transparent gain. I tried a large diaphragm condenser on a vocalist and the signal stayed open and detailed all the way up to plus 60 dB gain, with no the grit that cheap preamps sometimes introduce when you push them hard. If you're a podcaster or a content creator who usually works with just a couple of mics, the VLZ4 may feel a bit oversized. You'll end up with a lot of unused channels, and the learning curve for routing the 4-bus layout can be more than you need for a solo interview. In that case, a smaller analog mixer or a USB interface could give you the same results for less money and less desk space. Now, let's talk about the practical strengths that become evident after a few hours of use. One of the things that often trips up new owners is RF interference, especially in venues that have a lot of wireless equipment. Mackie's improved RF rejection on this model is not just a marketing line. In the rehearsal space I set up near a wireless guitar system, the hiss that usually sneaks into the low-frequency band stayed at bay. That kind of reliability matters when you're trying to capture a clean signal for a live stream or a recording that will go straight to YouTube. The phantom power implementation is solid. I ran 2 large diaphragm condensers simultaneously, and both received stable 48V without any flicker or dropout. That's a subtle point, but when you're tracking a vocal duo or a drum overhead pair, you can't afford a phantom power hiccup mid-take. Another real-world advantage is the plus 0.4 dB line input control. In a live setting, you often get line-level feeds from keyboards, playback devices, or DJ decks that sit at different voltage standards. Being able to dial the level up or down by a few decibels on the fly saves you from constantly reaching for a separate attenuator box. I used this control to balance a DJ's laptop output against a guitarist's DI box, and the mix stayed clean without any clipping or unnecessary gain staging. On the downside, the VLZ4 isn't a plug-and-play solution for someone who expects every knob to be labeled with a tutorial sticker. The channel layout is dense, and while the knobs themselves feel decent, the lack of clear color coding can cause a moment's hesitation when you're trying to mute a channel in the middle of a live song. A quick glance at the manual clears it up, but you'll spend a few minutes familiarizing yourself before you can confidently walk into a gig and pull the right fader. The bus routing can also be a hidden trade-off. The 4-bus architecture is great for sending separate mixes to stage monitors, a recording device, and a house PA, but you need to understand how to assign each channel to the right bus. If you've never dealt with bus assignments on an analog board, the learning curve is steeper than on a digital mixer with presets. In my podcast booth, I ended up using just the main mix and 1 auxiliary for a headphone feed. The extra buses sat unused, which isn't a problem, but it does feel like paying for features you'll never touch. In terms of value, the price point lands you in the sweet spot between entry-level mixers that skimp on preamp quality and high-end live rigs that cost a small fortune. You're basically paying for the Onyx preamps and the RF shielding, which are the things that most users actually notice when they're tracking or mixing live. If you compare the VLZ4 to a similar priced digital